things to eliminate to break through yourself and focus on living with purpose. There are moments when the mind keeps circling the same hesitation. A quiet tug between what must be done and what feels easier in the moment. The tension sits there, steady and familiar. There is a point where renewal doesn't come from pushing harder, but from drawing a line clean enough that it cuts through the drift. A line that stops the slow leaking of intention. A line that leaves no place to hide. When compromise stretches too far, something in you grows dull, and the dullness spreads. So the cut becomes necessary. Sharp, simple, final. Disciplined people understand this in a plain, almost severe way. They stop carrying what pulls them backward. They drop the anchors that once felt harmless, but now drain energy in small, constant ways. They walk away from the soft corners that promise relief, but quietly weaken resolve. That act of removal is not dramatic. It is structural. It clears the space where steadiness can return. A small shift, a deep shift. There is a kind of rise that doesn't come from inspiration. It comes from deciding again and again. Even when the mood is flat, even when the mind is tired and the will feels thin. Rising becomes a daily motion, not a grand resolution. A quiet answer to the same question each morning. Stand up, try again, continue. There is a quiet pattern that becomes visible when examined closely. A small pleasure taken too easily, a small intention postponed without resistance. And slowly, discipline bends. It never breaks in one moment. It thins. It softens. Until what once felt firm begins to slip through the hands. This erosion is subtle, yet it shapes potential more than any grand decision. Pause here. Behind each indulgence, there is a quiet trade, a bit of direction exchanged for a moment of ease. At first, it feels harmless. Then it becomes familiar. Then it becomes normal. And by the time it tightens, it's already a leash, one that pulls with impulses that never asked for permission. The self drifts toward whatever feels good right now, even when the cost arrives later. Steady thought turns faint. Steady effort turns fragile. Hold still. The pace of modern life sharpens this pull. Everything is within reach. Everything asks to be consumed. The noise is constant, and the temptations are gentle, but relentless. Being awake to this pressure becomes a form of inner work. A kind of quiet vigilance. Not dramatic, just steady awareness. Because without it, the mind slips into automatic indulgence again and again, until direction fades into background static. Breathe here. There is nothing loud in these moments, no crisis, no collapse, just a slow drift away from the person one intends to be. And the drift is always easier than the return. There is a certain precision in noticing how the mind behaves under constant interruption. The pattern becomes clear when observed quietly. A thought begins to form, then dissolves before it reaches its own shape. The drift is subtle, and it erodes more than focus. Constant digital noise fragments thought in ways that feel almost invisible at first. A message here, a notification there, each one tiny, almost harmless. But the mind pays a price every time it shifts direction. The inner rhythm breaks. The thread loosens. What should have been a clear line turns into scattered pieces that never rejoin. Silence becomes rare. And without silence, depth becomes a struggle. A short truth lingers beneath it all. Fragmented attention breeds a fragmented inner world. Attention becomes something more delicate when seen this way. It is not an endless resource. It is a currency that must be guarded to achieve clarity. There is a cost to spending it carelessly, a cost to letting every impulse pull it away. Clarity does not arise from constant motion. It comes from staying with one thing long enough for it to unfold. A steady focus, A deliberate breath. A refusal to scatter. This stance is not dramatic. It is simply protective. Choosing what deserves attention becomes an act of quiet discipline. A brief pause can be enough to reclaim direction. From that pause comes another realization. Digital detox is not a trend or a challenge. It is a necessity for sovereignty and deep focus. Stepping back is not about rejecting the world. It is about reclaiming the space to think without being pulled. A withdrawal, even a small one, restores a sense of ownership over the mind. The noise fades. The inner tone steadies. And what remains is a softer clarity that does not need effort to maintain. A simple stillness. A reminder that freedom often begins with subtraction. In that subtraction, the mind finds its center again. An analytical way to look at influence is to notice how quietly it takes shape. It rarely announces itself. It settles in through repetition, through tone, through the small habits absorbed without thought. A subtle drift. There is a certain heaviness that forms when surrounded by weak company. Not dramatic. Just a slow lowering of standards until it feels natural. Discipline thins out. The edge softens. Moments that once demanded clarity become diluted. It becomes easy to accept less from yourself because the room accepts less from itself. A quiet permission slips in, and once it does, it grows. Softer choices, lighter promises, a sense that the day can be postponed. This is how mediocrity becomes familiar, and familiarity is powerful. It reshapes what feels possible. It reshapes what feels necessary. Pause here. There is another kind of presence that moves differently. It does not press. It does not perform. True friendship holds a sharper mirror. One that reflects without judgment, yet refuses to flatter. There is care in that firmness. A kind of warmth that asks you to rise, not to impress, but to align with who you claim to be. It steadies you when your inner voice wavers. It reminds you that strength is not loud. It is consistent. This kind of companionship lifts without pulling. It challenges without creating tension. It gives space, but not excuses. A simple truth rests at the center of it. Real support makes you more disciplined, not less. Hold on to that. There are moments when the only way to protect that discipline is by stepping back. Not arguing, not explaining, just creating distance. Absence draws a line that words cannot. It clarifies what you will allow into your inner space and what you will not carry anymore. There is a calm clarity in that choice. You reclaim your attention, you reclaim your rhythm, and the world adjusts around the boundaries you hold. Let it adjust. An analytical look at emotional control always begins with the hidden cost of losing it. The mind scatters when reactions take over. The body tightens. Attention slips into places where it cannot do any real work. And the energy that could have been used for clarity dissolves into impulses that feel urgent but lead nowhere. There is a quiet fatigue that follows these moments, the kind that lingers long after the situation fades. A simple truth stands in the middle of it all. Reactivity drains strength. This is why discipline matters. Not the rigid kind that forces feelings underground, but the steady kind that gives them space without letting them steer. The difference is subtle. Suppression tries to silence what is alive inside. Discipline listens, then decides. One allows a return to balance. The other builds pressure that eventually breaks through at the wrong time. And when the day already feels heavy, that difference matters more than it seems. A moment of steadiness can hold the whole structure together. Hold. The deeper work is to avoid becoming owned by triggers that appear without warning. A comment, a memory, a small inconvenience that lands on a tired mind. These things try to pull attention into patterns that feel familiar but corrosive. They whisper that reaction is the only option, that there is no space between stimulus and response. Yet there is always a space, sometimes narrow, sometimes barely noticeable. But it exists. And when that space is protected, the provocation loses its grip. Remaining unowned is not about rising above everything. It is about staying intact within yourself. Even when the day is rough, even when patience wears thin, the strength comes from keeping that inner room clear enough to see the next step without the fog of agitation. And in that clarity, a quiet kind of power appears. A steady line forms through the noise. Still, the pattern becomes clearer when observed without emotion. Excuses drain momentum before it even forms. They whisper at the edges of intention, slowing the shift from thought to movement. And once that slowing begins, inertia settles in, a soft weight. Easy to ignore at first, but heavy enough to hold a person in place. Excuses are the language of stagnation, small words that steal potential without making a sound. They freeze the moment before action. They linger, and they take more than they give. There is a plainness in action that excuses cannot imitate. Action stands on its own. It does not ask to be understood or admired. It does not negotiate. It simply moves. And in that movement, clarity appears. Even an imperfect step carries a quiet certainty that no justification can produce. A long breath, then a short shift forward, then stillness again. Action is pure. It requires nothing extra, no decoration, no story to explain why it is happening. It just becomes real. The truth is rarely gentle. It pushes. It strips away the comfort that excuses protect. Facing it demands a steadiness that often feels harsh, especially in moments of fatigue or doubt. Yet that discomfort holds the shape of growth. A slow tightening inside the chest. A pause. A recognition. Meanwhile, comfort asks for reasons, for soothing, for explanations that make inaction feel reasonable. It wraps hesitation in soft logic. Truth demands discomfort. Comfort demands rationalization. One sharp, one warm. But only one leads forward. There is a point where the inner noise settles, and the choice becomes unmistakable. Stay where it feels safe, wrapped in familiar justifications, or step into the plain air of effort, where nothing hides behind excuses. That single step says everything. It is quiet. It is firm. It is enough. There is a clear pattern that becomes obvious when looking closely at effort and endurance. The body often speaks before the mind admits anything. It signals strain, imbalance, or strength, with a directness that thought sometimes avoids. That is why the body becomes the first layer of discipline. It carries every intention long before intention becomes action. When the body falters, even a steady mind feels scattered. Pause here. Let that settle. The body is the foundation of discipline and the vessel for intention. Every plan relies on muscles that stay steady. Every promise rests on breathing that does not break. A tired body can make even simple tasks feel heavy. A grounded body can make difficult moments feel manageable. There is nothing dramatic in this, just a quiet truth that repeats each day, a truth that waits. To train the body is to honor the mechanism that allows all achievement. Effort placed into movement, rest, and balance is not vanity. It is respect for the tool that carries every decision. Training does not need to be extreme, it only needs to be consistent. Small actions, done regularly, shift the inner weight of a day. They reduce the friction that often feeds frustration. They sharpen attention without forcing it. A simple rhythm. A steady anchor. Discipline of the body is discipline of the mind made tangible. Structure in physical routine becomes structure in thought. The act of showing up, even when tired, steadies the inner landscape. It quiets the urge to postpone. It softens the habit of giving in too quickly. The body becomes proof that intention can endure discomfort without collapsing. Proof that effort can be trusted. There is calm in that. A calm earned through repetition, not inspiration. In tending to the body, the mind gains something subtle but vital. A sense of direction that does not shake at every emotion. A steadiness that does not depend on mood. A clarity that returns each time the muscles tighten, release, and reset. And in that quiet cycle, discipline becomes real. An analytical look reveals a simple truth. Energy scattered without direction dissolves into noise. Purpose acts as the quiet frame that holds everything together, even when the day feels heavy and the mind drifts. Without that frame, discipline thins out. It weakens in small, almost invisible ways. Tasks linger. Intentions blur. Momentum fades until only the feeling of being busy remains. A still point is needed. A place where effort can land. Purpose gives that place. And when it is clear, even a tired mind can move toward it. One step, then another. Steady, there is a certain tension in trying to hold focus. It feels like pushing against a current that keeps shifting. Attention pulls toward noise, toward habits that offer relief but no progress. Staying with what matters becomes a quiet form of resistance. A small rebellion carried out in silence, not dramatic, not loud, just the steady refusal to be pulled off course. The pull is constant. The resistance must be constant too. And sometimes the only thing that keeps the line straight is the memory of why the work matters in the first place. Hold that, even briefly. It helps. It steadies the breath. Direction becomes the anchor that the inner life offers. The world will not offer it. The world offers motion without aim, distraction disguised as urgency, noise dressed as importance. The inner voice must become the counterweight. Calm, precise, responsible. It does not fight the world. It simply chooses the path within it. A narrow path, but enough. When that direction is present, the outside chaos loses its grip. The pace slows. The mind settles. A single thought rises with clarity. Move toward what holds meaning. The rest can pass. An analytical look at comfort shows how quietly it erodes the very thing it promises to protect. Ease creates a smooth surface where discipline once held its shape. Over time, the edges soften. The will softens with it. What once felt steady begins to loosen, almost without notice. The mind senses the shift, yet tries to pretend nothing has changed. Then a moment arrives when resistance is required, and the weakness becomes clear. Strength needs friction. It always has. Without it, the inner muscles forget their purpose. They dim. And the person who once moved with intention starts moving on autopilot. A quiet drift, a slow slide. There is a point where comfort stops being support and becomes dependence. Tools meant to help begin to feel like something that must be held on to. The reliance grows subtle, but steady. The mind looks for the easiest route, even when it knows the simplest path is rarely the truest one. The trap tightens, not with force, but with softness. Voluntary discomfort breaks that pattern. A small challenge, a chosen friction, something that reminds the inner voice that it still has agency, that it can step toward difficulty without waiting for life to impose it. One step is enough. Just one, a reset. Gratitude often fades in environments with no contrast. The things that once felt meaningful now feel expected, automatic, taken for granted. It happens gently, and that gentleness is what makes it dangerous. Hardship changes the way the world is seen. It sharpens edges. It reveals the weight of small details. A single success feels heavier. A single moment of stillness feels clearer. Struggle renews appreciation, not by adding anything new, but by removing the haze. Suddenly, the familiar feels alive again. And in that clarity, gratitude returns. Quiet, steady, real. There is a quiet clarity that appears when identity is examined as a pattern rather than a statement. The mind stops chasing labels and returns to what is actually repeated each day. A simple truth emerges. Identity is the sum of repeated actions, not declarations. The things done in silence shape the core far more than the things announced. And when the actions drift from the words, the tension is immediate. It sits under the surface. It disrupts the sense of direction. That fracture grows whenever effort moves one way and intention another. Inconsistency fractures integrity and divides thought from action. The split may feel small at first, but it weakens the ground beneath every decision. It becomes harder to trust oneself, harder to hold steady. A quiet doubt settles in and stays. It lingers. It drains energy meant for better things. But when the inner line is steady, everything shifts. When identity is consistent, peace replaces confusion. There is less noise, less friction between what is felt and what is done. The mind stops wrestling with itself. A calm certainty grows, not because life becomes easier, but because the self stops pulling in opposite directions. The path may still be difficult. The pace may still be slow, yet something inside stands firm still.